Welcome to the Earth Hotel, your spot for broadcast dampness and shush fuss. In local news, a bean invalidated an unknown geological craft which sung within a bench. Preserved, the mail dismissed the rubber territory, saying, "It bumbles under mad clearance. Pace riots under the gear wards on our gentle continental enemy." We're back. Are you? We'll begin with an invocation of Ra, the sun, not to be confused with Sun Ra, who will speak to us shortly.
Hail to you, having come as Khepra, even Khepra who is the creator of the gods. You rise and shine on the back of your mother, having appeared in glory as the king of the gods. Your mother, Nuit, shall use her arms on your behalf in making greeting. May you give power and might in vindication, in the coming forth of this living soul to the Ka of this chilled. The eye has opened unto thee, I see thee in thy bark, with Horus at the helm, and Thoth and Ma'at beside him. I invoke thee, Lord of the circles, the sender forth of light, who governs his circles, the great god, Ra. Hail to you, Lord of all, I have come to you spiritualized and pure, the eye of Horus is upon me. Allow my heart to rightly guide me in this destroying hour. Descend, appear as thou art, even as the great falcon. I receive thee as the celestial cow who is thy sacred eye. I receive thee through my blood. I drink to thee in thy breath. Come to me, I receive you. Repel the crocodile, protect me, make a way for me. Safeguard me in truth. I do not fear, encircle me. Make goodly the paths for me in thy dignity and thy power. Embrace me, for I adore thee. I work for thee. My aspiration is to serve thee ever so rightly in the holy work. Come now in peace and love, O great God who is the sun.
Thank you for joining us. My name is Jackie Cotillard, and I'm your host. The show called for an opening monologue, but the show also called for a very long interview from our guest Jimmy Griffin, the man behind the counter at Renaissance Records most mornings if you're taking a stroll through 5 Points in Birmingham, so I'll make it brief. We sat together in his kitchen and spoke about the magic behind the music, his first-hand experience with Mississippi blues, and the winding path of the creative person in modern times and out of time. All of my grace and good feelings go out to Jimmy for being a fabulous guest and for setting up the show so nicely with his host of musical references that we can dig into. I give up the rest of the episode to Jimmy's trained archival ear, his encyclopedic knowledge of music according to Birmingham Wiki, with whom I heartily agree. During the interview break, while Jimmy recommended playing Long-Haired Donny by R.L. Burnside, which you can find, for the sake of copyright, you're instead going to get a home-brewed sample of Tirag music from Zanzibar, Tanzania, performed by the Doe Country's Music Academy, sung by Siti Mwalimu. The song is Kijiti, which is a traditional tune sung in Swahili. Thank you very much to those folks for their kind words and contribution to the show. I really appreciate it. A show which would not be complete without a glimpse at some new material that is a touch more local to close us out. Back in June, I emceed a Flusnoix mix show at the Soft Rock Bungalow with a bunch of folks. The field recordings from that night have never been revealed, until now. Jimmy sat in with a mixed group of folks from Flusnoix and elsewhere that includes the sound talents of Joel Switzer, Taylor Rouse, Walker Yancey, John Paul Case, Jimmy Griffin, Jess Marie Walker, Brent Stouffer, and myself in a big ol' wash. Listen close for the message that Jimmy brings to us in the midst of all that making, with some opening words by Sun Ra to light this particular candle. Sleep tight and stay close.
The music is different here. The vibrations are different. Not like Planet Rave. Planet Rave's sound of guns, anger, frustration. There was no one to talk to up in Planet Rave to understand. We set up a colony for black people here. See what they can do on the planet all their own without any white people there. They could drink in the beauty of this planet. Would affect their vibrations. for the better, of course. Another place in the universe, up under different stars. That would be where the altered destiny would come in. Equation-wise, the first thing to do is to consider time as officially ended. We work on the other side of time. We'll bring them here through either isotope teleportation, transmolecularization, or better still, teleport the whole planet here through music.
It's funny, people who come to Birmingham from other countries or on vacation, they're interested in things from the South. I've heard bands tell me that having an Alabama connection helps them make connections like in Japan or Europe, because the dynamics of the South is kind of, I don't know, the South was Gothic before it was hip, you might say, things like that. Not exactly a darkness, but it's a very, I can always say America's like a frontier culture. We haven't been here long, but within that, there's some kind of deep, dark things from just the agrarian going to the industrial, whatever that means. It's real fascinating. We got these cross-cultural things. Appalachians, you had all the English people who came in and brought English working class culture. In New Orleans and Louisiana, the Gulf Coast, you've got the influx of French and German and Spanish. And also with the African influx, to me, there's similarities between North Mississippi hill country blues rhythm and Haitian and Nigerian drumming, like the back and forth rhythm.
Yeah.
So all that stuff kind of factors in. As they say in Louisiana, the South is kind of like, it's slower. It's kind of like a thick gumbo that boiled a long time. It's not as bright. It didn't hit technology as quickly as the North, so maybe that's a good thing.
Have you lived a lot of other places? You've been in this house for quite a while.
Yeah, I've been here since 1988. I grew up, I was raised in West Alabama in Fayette County, which is kind of the middle of nowhere. While I was still in high school, the Greyhounds didn't stop there anymore. So
Yeah.
it's like an hour from Columbus, Mississippi, an hour from Jasper, and an hour from Tuscaloosa. It had kind of cultural things happening there that would surprise you. Like I made friends with, there's a great outsider artist, Jimmy Lee Sutta, is from Fayette. And we were real good friends. And I would get paintings from him and we would go hang out with him. And he was amazing. He painted with dirt and mixed house paint in. And his stuff's all over the world now. Really killer. But the reason he got so famous was not just that he invented his own kind of paint. He had that artistic thing where when you see a painting that looks like it's about to move, literally some of his images look like they're about to jump off the board. He mainly painted on boards and found objects and stuff. I can't give away his secret, but he had a secret ingredient that made the dirt stick to the board. He was so funny. He said people would come and visit him and said, "How did you make that mud stick? I tried putting mud on a board and it wouldn't stay." And he would just smile.
That seems like the perfect place for pre-formative musical interest, you know?
It kind of makes you, when you hear something different, it really strikes your ear. Like I remember being in high school and hearing Jimi Hendrix, Purple Haze, come on the radio. And I was saying, this has to be coming from outer space. Nobody makes chords like that. You kind of find things that surprise you, like when you hear Muddy Waters or different blues artists for the first time. They just kind of immediately appealed to me because they have a texture. I kind of jokingly call it bamboo music. It's got kind of an organic timbre to it. They don't hit the changes. They don't follow the melody line like everybody does. It's a little bit of unpredictableness. To me, one of the perfect examples is, in fact, when I was in college, I actually convinced the student government to give me $150. And that's all it took to bring Mississippi Fred McDowell from Como, Mississippi to play a show at our theater. He was so wonderful. He sings a song called Frisco Lines.
Yeah.
He sings with an arch, but he creates a tension between the rhythm and the melody because he's got this complex hill country rhythm going on.
Yeah.
And then he kind of sings the vocal against it or across it. That creates that kind of dramatic tension. And it's kind of like a stop, you know, like a song can have a stop where everybody drops out. Mm-hmm. It's like a stop that's not a stop because it almost stops, but it doesn't. whatever that means.
It's like the stop in the shuffle, the transfer between the left and right foot, or like the break between out breath and in breath. Like it's kind of there moving.
He let me play tambourine with him at this show, which was really, I really didn't know what I was doing, but he said, well, come on up and play with me. And so if I got a little loud, he would turn to me and say, take your time, take your time. And that stays in my head. When I have I'm getting anxious about something or anything, I'll say to myself, take your time.
Wow.
You hear his voice. That's another one of my theories. When you hear a great musician's voice, it sounds like music. You hear time in it. You hear how they think about the world. They have a special kind of cadence, like especially true, say, with someone like Sun Ra, who's he's so brilliant on every level. But to me, Sun Ra's voice is like music. And he's also like a poet and a comedian.
He had a great way of interacting and really delivering on his concept that was illustrative.
Right. He had the attraction rather than promotion. He pulled you in.
Yeah.
Once in New Orleans, we saw him. He brought his orchestra. The night before, we'd heard him on the riverboat, President, and they just transposed the whole boat. And then the next day, he's in a little tent with a small ensemble and a grand piano and a horn section. So he walks out on stage. He's wearing Google-eye glasses with springs on them. He takes them off and he says to the audience, if I told you I was from outer space, you wouldn't believe me. Why should you? And then, bam, he's down at the piano. Like when Monk would dance around to the drums and then, bam, he's on the note.
That's like vaudeville.
Yeah. But he had all those levels going on. Yeah, and I think some of the great musicians like Sun Ra, they're so competent in their abilities, they can have what I call generosity of spirit. They're bringing you something, and they're I can't quite put it into words. He had some of the greatest musicians in the world, but he'd also sometimes bring in dancers from South America or just things you wouldn't expect. Mm-hmm. Probably, I know he was all about discipline too. Like some of his songs have a discipline number to them. So, and he didn't sleep much. He would call practices in the middle of the night. So if you were in the orchestra, you might have to get up at 3:00 in the morning and start working on some charts. He had just finished.
Did he have a no drugs policy like Zappa did?
Right. They played 3 nights at Tuscaloosa at the Chucker. Some friends of mine brought a refurbished Winnebago travel bus up to the Chucker and parked it outside so that the orchestra would have a green room to hang out in.
Oh, cool.
And at one point, they loaded the whole orchestra up and took them to Dreamland Barbecue in Tuscaloosa. And a lot of them were vegetarians.
Right.
So the ones who could eat barbecue who weren't vegetarian were making fun of the ones who couldn't. He said, well, some of those guys, all they could do was run the bread through the sauce, And this is kind of how Sun Ra could be generous. A newspaper reporter did an interview with him while he was in Tuscaloosa. He was just hanging out and answering these questions. And when it was finished, Sun Ra said, that fellow was really nice, but his questions were a little earthbound. And I think that's why Bob Dylan did all that crazy aggressive stuff with interviewers back in the 60s, because they simply weren't asking him the right questions.
Yeah, he was giving him more than enough to dig into. It wasn't like he sensationalized himself.
Right. And it's like now I've noticed that his interviews and things he writes, he wants to tell people about music, like what his influences were, how he feels about music. And there's this really funny interview with Dylan where the guys in the suits are asking him, Mr. Dylan, have you got any advice for the young folk singers coming up? And there's a pause, and Dylan kind of looks around the room or something and says, well, good luck.
This is what becomes of you.
This is what happens. I've got this little thing I say, I love Bob Dylan, I love Miles Davis, but I would never have wanted to talk to them.
No.
Because I would be,
That's what I liked about what you said before. I don't know what I would have to say to them.
Right. There's probably a level, there were people that Miles would talk to, and it was more on a music level. They had to kind of be at his level. But in his biography, which is really hilarious, where he kind of is narrated and he kind of wins every situation. He's talking about, I guess it's his condo where he lives in New York, and he's in the elevator with people, and he says, I don't understand. Why didn't anybody talk to me? I'll talk to anybody. But then on the other hand, my friends got to see Miles at a small club on the West Coast, and they were hanging out with the members of the band, buying everybody drinks. And Miles is at the end of the bar hanging out with two attractive women. So after they had bought rounds of drinks, after 2 sets, they say to the musicians in the band, hey, can we go talk to Miles? And they just look at him and say, no, y'all can't go talk to Miles.
Around 10.
But I got to tell my other Miles Davis story because it's probably not in any books. When I worked at Charlemagne, we had this elderly black guy named Mr. Dixon who used to work in Chicago. He'd come back to Birmingham, and when I'd asked him, what did you do in Chicago? He would just smile and say, I can't tell you that. Somebody might get killed. He was just so cool. His nickname was Sleepy because he had kind of droopy eyes, and he loved jazz. Like, I was walking home from work one day. He was riding around in his big ride, like an LTD or a deuce and a quarter, and he had a jazz tape in the tape player, and he said, that's Ben Webster. And that's all he said. You know, it was just like he was living in this world that was totally had command of his world.
Yeah.
And he knew who he was. So his Miles Davis story was he's at this club, and Miles is about to do a week-long engagement, and he's talking to the club owner. And Miles walks up to Sleepy and the club owner and says to the club owner, hey, man, I've got to ask you a question. And the club owner says, just a minute, Miles, I'm talking to Sleepy. And so Miles is kind of taken aback. And so when they finish their conversation, Miles turns to Sleepy and says, so you're that goddamn Sleepy I've been hearing about. And Sleepy says, you goddamn right. And that's the end of the story. So I got this insight into a kind of culture that you may not really be aware of. Sleepy would tell me when he meet a musician he knew, sometimes they would like cuss each other out and then say, come on, I'll buy you a drink.
Yeah.
It wasn't aggressive. It was just respect levels, I think. Miles accepted Sleepy as being at the top of his game at what he did, although we'll never know what Sleepy did because he wouldn't tell us.
Real recognizes real.
Yeah.
As the kids say. You grew up in Fayette.
Fayette. It was originally called Frog Level, and then when it got incorporated in honor of Lafayette, but they didn't call it. In the South, you kind of split syllables, became Fayette, so it's got the Southern roll to it.
Do you perform? I don't know that much. I performed with you before.
Oh, I'm kind of like, my joke is I'm an amateur who gets to play with professionals sometimes. Years ago in the 80s, I was actually in a really cool blues band with Davy Williams, LaDonna Smith, and John McKay. It was called Trains in Trouble, and it was so cool because Davy had this theory. Davy used to play with Johnny Shines back in the day in Tuscaloosa. And he's a really incredible blues player. He can play all the different hooks and everything from Robert Johnson to Howlin' Wolf. But he wanted to have a cover band that played what he called convulsive blues. He wanted there to be an improv element in the way the blues were played, even though it honored all the nuance of how the songs were supposed to sound. So since there wasn't a drummer in the band, I played a bass drum with a mallet and a hi-hat with a stick, kind of cross-drummed. And I was so bad about controlling sound that I usually had the foot all the way down on the pedal and the hi-hat all the time. So I knew the sound would be clack, but it wouldn't be too loud. And Davey said he didn't want a lot of drums or cymbals because the cymbals would get into the sound register of his slide guitar. So that was fun. So we like split vocals. I sang some. John McKay, the harmonica player, sang some. And LaDonna sang some. And she played keyboards and violin. And sometimes when I sang, she played drums, and then it would be like an explosion. She played a whole lot of drums.
Huh. Yeah, I can imagine LaDonna on drums.
Yeah, she hears everything. So we did everything from Orange Blossom Special to Killing Floor by Howlin' Wolf, Robert Johnson, Honeybee. And Davey would do these incredible, as you might imagine, blues solos. It was a lot of fun, but everybody who's performed at different levels always say, you know, it's a good gig when the band doesn't outnumber the audience.
I'm going to remember that one.
And once we were playing, somebody got us a gig way up in the country, like, I guess, I can't even remember which county it was, but it was outside of the Birmingham perimeter. And as we were setting up the equipment, some guys came up. Do y'all know any Skinnerd? Then I knew we were in trouble. And as soon as we hit our first blues number, everybody in the bar went into the other room and started playing pool. And after the first set, the owner came and paid us to leave because he did it with so much Southern finesse. He came up and said, you boys look a little tired. What did we agree on? And he gave us, I think, $150. Yeah. And so we packed up. And but what was really cool, which it seemed almost like it was a dream, we're out in the parking lot. One of the guys is out there. He's got one of the cardboard 12-pack holders that beer or sodas come in, and he's got a live possum in there. And the possum is just going wild, and it's in this box scrambling around. He looks it up and smiles and says, "Don't worry, I was raised up with these things." And then he walked off with his possum in a box.
Like away into the night or
into
the bar?
Night. Yeah, into the night. He's got a possum in a box. And I thought,
what else do you do?
This is my friend at Renaissance says, Gary Bourgeois, only in Alabama. That kind of hooks us back to the South is in its own way, like every place in the world, there's like eccentricity and fascinating things, but the South has its own nuance. If you think about within a relative close distance, you've got New Orleans, you've got Atlanta, you've got Birmingham, Black Belt, Alabama, which is very cultural, a lot of incredible things. There's a record that's really hard to find, brass bands from Alabama. So I've forgotten the city it's in the rural, that got instruments and taught themselves to play, probably around the 30s and 40s. And they would get on wagons and they would go to your house. That's the name of the record. It's on our Hooley Records. It's called Country Brass Bands. So these guys, untrained, self-taught by ear, go to your house on a wagon and play their versions of songs. And, it sounds like Ornette Coleman or Albert Ayler because of their harmony and dissonance coming back and forth.
Wow. If anybody has that record, send it to Renaissance. I want to take a second to give a shout out to the people there are people all over the United States and the world listening to the show, and I didn't really realize that. So I'm glad to bring someone in who knows what they're talking about as far as the cultural history of where we are, because you're right. The worst thing shouldn't represent Alabama, but there's so much good stuff that there's no reason we shouldn't come to our senses as a collective.
That's right.
So you've been tied up with the mid-Birmingham record industry for a couple of years,
right? For
a little while. What's your experience like in that?
I got really lucky because I got out of school and really couldn't find a job. I had a BA in English, and which is kind of, you can't do anything with that. I went and got a teacher's certificate through UAB, partly because my job that I was terrible at the time was driving a wholesale flour truck, and I was the worst driver in the whole fleet. I realized that if I went back to school, I could get a work-study job part-time and make more money than I was making driving the flour van.
Right.
But then when I got that degree, I couldn't keep kids quiet. So that was a total wash. 2 career blunders, but I was mowing grass in the daytime and washing dishes at night. My girlfriend at the time, her sister told the manager of the Oz record chain to give me a job. And he hired me without even an interview. So 40 plus years ago, that's how I started in what we call psycho retail.
Yes, I was hoping we would make it around organically, just like a retail.
Psycho retail and it can apply to any kind of being a waiter or waitress or selling clothes. But when you're a good psycho retailer, you realize to take literally whatever anybody says as they come in the door. Because, it may take you 25 sentences. I usually go from the pyramid up when I tell a story, and some people go down. It takes them forever. Oh, you want a CD with Patsy Cline singing Walking After Midnight? And they said, yes, but do you have it on a cassette? It's that kind of thing. It spins around. So psycho retail is about having the thing I'm thinking about in later life, having generosity of spirit. You have generosity of spirit with the customer because you're grateful someone came in, and especially I'm lucky because it's music. It's something people mutually care about. And actually music is kind of a personal thing. It's one of your things that defines your personality.
Right.
So it's fun to sell music because it's something, just like it's fun to have an art gallery. It's something that means something to people. And it's also sociological because in utopian visions of the world, we see everyone as our brother and sisters. Everyone's equal. And if you really think about music, when you enjoy music, it's a mental and physical experience, and everyone shares that equally. My story on that is years ago when I was working at the Oz at Loman's Village, I was running the checkout, and I'm playing Professor Longhair on the turntable, and a customer is checking out, and I was real excited. I said, "Isn't this great?" And they said, "Not particularly." So it was like, as Ringo Starr said, a bullet in my brain. I said, oh, one person's Professor Longhair is another person's Saturday Night Fever. It's all a wash. It's all a wash, you know.
Yeah.
And that's why High Fidelity is a brilliant movie about being in the music industry, but they forget that one thing. It's a little dangerous to be too refined in your taste that you think your taste defines what somebody else's is. So that's why people with big ears will listen to anything. And then it falls even in when people get a paradigm like, I don't like opera, I don't like rap. You think, well, did you hear the Sugar Hill Gang, Rapper's Delight? I remember the first time I heard Rapper's Delight. I was riding the interstate back from my Lomans Village gig, and all of a sudden Rapper's Delight comes on the radio, and I said, just like Hendrix, Purple Haze, I said, wow, the world is changing. What is this? It's massive, you know. And so in opera, I finally got to where I understood opera because I'd flick on PBS going home from work, and I'd hear a live opera rather than a pre-recorded opera. And you start realizing these people have such command of their voice and so much emotion in the roles they're playing that, you know, it's like listening to Charlie Parker or something because they're on the one. Or like, I love Maria Callas. I'm not real into opera, but you can hear Maria Callas take a note and you say, wow.
Through the radio across miles and miles, something happening somewhere.
It's real.
Someone fighting, you know, winged things that are, there's angels and demons stuff in there. And we'd love to see that battle go on in someone and then win.
You're quoting Sun Ra there. I think one of his songs is Angels and Demons at Play.
No.
Yeah, you just got one in there. Sing. So anyway, I wound up at Renaissance Records. I worked at Charlemagne Records 34 years, and I kind of got that job by accident too, because the chain store I was at in Lomans Village, nobody came to Lomans Village. So I went out of business. Oh, well, I was just kind of hanging out at Charlemagne and a bookstore that's now closed called Apple Books because I didn't have anything else to do. Gary Bourgeois, my good friend, and Marion said, you're good at this. Why don't you start working part-time? And it just turned into yet another career. So I've been very fortunate because when I retired from Charlemagne in 2013, I thought, oh, I'll just get a part-time job to supplement Social Security. And after a year and a half of filling out internet applications wrong, I realized, you know, I was doomed. And then Gary said, well, just come work for us. I mean, you're really, I guess the word you hear, but it's true. You're blessed when you get to be able to do something you can do. Because I remember I was terrible at cutting grass. I was the worst driver in the delivery fleet. So it was kind of like you don't feel as happy when you're not being useful. It's almost meditative in a way. I like raking leaves because that's kind of meditative. You don't think anything except about the leaves and moving them around. So then we get to the big word, serenity.
Boom.
Boom. You can have serenity just in accomplishing a task, I think.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And that feedback that we get, you know, that static that we get from knowing that we're not useful in something and doing it despite the madness that tells us that it's not our thing. That doesn't mean you think you're better than those jobs or like that you're afraid to work hard or whatever. It's like your thing is not cutting grass. Like it's not that thing. But there are people that do it so well, it's astounding.
Yeah, well, like there are people who say, I'm an artist with a weed eater, and they are. Mm-hmm. And when somebody finally handed me a weed eater, I felt like I was holding an alien creature. I was actually terrified. I felt like there's no way I can use this machine because it makes a lot of noise. It's got this thing that goes real fast at the bottom. Got to control it. Yeah. So I have to say I have a lot of respect for anything anyone does well because I had this thought about coming up in grammar school. You know, you meet the whole spectrum of humanity and you realize, again, like we said about taste in music, everything's a wash. One classmate can draw really great pictures. Another classmate makes 100 on every math test. Somebody else can do more chin-ups than you can do. So basically, skill level and what people can do, strengths and weaknesses, whatever that means.
I think we can give ourselves a lot of social opportunity. Like you were talking about that graceful giving spirit. You can find a way to involve people in things that they didn't know they had.
Right.
When you can give unexpected gifts to people, you play with them like dogs play with each other.
Right.
It's magic attention.
Right.
You know.
Magic's important. And talking about Zen, like the the Coal Mountain poems where they talk about the monks who know so much, all they want to do is sweep out the kitchen. And if you ask them an important Buddhist question, they just laugh and run away and hide. So I think Gary Snyder did a translation of it, but it's called Coal Mountain Poems. And I think it's just showing the contrast between having skills or knowledge but not being attached to them. Mm-hmm. In the Western world, non-attachment's cool. You don't have it all the time. It just kind of, you get lucky and you have it sometimes. But you can just see that there's so many different ways of looking at everything. It's sort of, I always use the term baseball cards. Like they say, you know so much about music, but I'll say, well, it's just baseball cards. You know, there's things that stuck in my head. Somebody else has art history baseball cards. Somebody else has Enlightenment baseball cards. And they share them, but they share them through example. Probably not every person who has something really profound to tell you is going to put it in words. It's going to be more like a sneak. It's going to slip up on you.
Sneaky. Yeah.
And that takes us in a way back to the music scene. This is a little off subject, but there's this wonderful expression in New Orleans. They have the social and saving clubs where the guys get together and put on parades and they have fun together. The name of one of the social and saving clubs is the Scene Boosters. And the concept, you expand that concept in New Orleans, a scene booster is somebody who shows up and enjoys the show. Whether it's a parade, rhythm and blues, a jazz quartet. There's no scene without the scene booster. Yeah. You know, the musicians are important, but it's like Coleridge in the Transcendental Triangle. You got to have the musician and the audience for everyone to have a good time. That's all part of the scene, is the people who take the trouble to put on the show, the people who show up and play, the people who come and have a good time. And that happens a lot in Birmingham. I had a professor in college that was really into Coleridge, and he loved to talk about the Transcendental Triangle. I haven't used my English major cards in a long time, but right. It's basically Coleridge had this theory that you have the poet, and he's just putting words on a page. You know, but it's coming from his subconscious. You know, he's working with a combination of imagination and skillfulness to make this like, Kubla Khan, which he heard in a dream. What he's saying, though, is that, fine, this poem is on the page, but until on the other corner of the triangle, someone reads it, maybe in another country, maybe in another lifetime, the combination of what he put on the page, the sensation of reading it going into another person's mind, it meets at the top of the triangle, and it's larger than the two parts. The communication process to actually, boom, that blew my mind. I have to put the book down feeling. When you read a great poem or hear some great music, you say, I think I got to turn this off. I can't hear anymore. So that's kind of like a home run.
All right, we're going to be right back. Do you have anything specific you'd want to play in the interim?
There's a song by R.L. Burnside called Long-Haired Donnie. That's a great song.
Okay.
It's got a kind of drum to it. It goes, bom, 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 bom. And then he does, we're gonna see my long hair. I
know that song, yeah.
That's got that cross rhythm thing I was talking about, where he's singing across the rhythm. And the beat is almost trance-like. I got this feeling that Nigerian Haitian culture got transported to North Mississippi, too. It's in the music of the deserts in Africa with the Tarag music. That music is just, the Tarag music sounds like North Mississippi and the Velvet Underground in Africa jamming together. It's really cool. Just a shout out to Soft Rock Bungalow, man.
Can't give enough.
That's such an incredible place, and they're so welcoming. They're like, how will we say, they're like Olympic level scene boosters.
Yeah. Patron saints.
Yeah.
The improv that you heard after the monologue was an improvisation that we both did with members of Flusnoy, with members of the evening. And you were doing some crazy yelling. You and Walker were going back and forth on drums. We didn't know each other all that well, but that was really a treat. You just jumped into yelling about, do you remember what?
Well, I was like, actually, I don't know if he wrote it, but I was, Roger Stella does this great improv voice piece besides doing his electronic noise stuff. And I think he might have gotten it from somebody else. So I was saying, just this is something Uncle Roger said. I was referencing Roger Stella, but he was saying, he starts yelling at the top of his voice, "You're all going to die. You're all going to die. You think you're immortal, but you're all going to die." That to me is such compelling words, and I can even backtrack and be a little literary. I remember being like a freshman in college, sitting on my bed reading Walt Whitman, and there was a line in there that suddenly just gave me a chill because mortality. At a certain age, you don't really have visions of impermanence or mortality. You know, really it's very true that we do feel like we're immortal sometimes. It's also funny, and in a dark way, to be yelling at the top of your lungs, you think you're immortal, but you're all going to die. But it's not putting someone down. It's just like, it's almost like it's a human condition.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why it's so funny. It was so plain. You didn't have a mic, so you were just yelling over everything else. So all this stuff is going on, and it would break through. And what Uncle Roger said really threw me off. Like, if you had just said the other bits, then there was some kind of mystique about it. And I guess that's the mystique of the handoff of one person to the next. I talked to Milton last week. That was the previous episode. And he spoke about Roger, and we played some of Silver Reich stuff. That's so funny that all of this stuff just kind of flowed together from that fateful night, you know?
And I think of that as one of Roger's greatest hits, if we can go there.
Really?
I'll say, if he's performing, sometimes I'll say, "Hey, man, are you going to do that, please?"
Play the hits.
It's like asking for Last Train to Clarksdale. And then Sun Ra, I love Sun Ra did a lot of bass chants, or, you know, he did poetry. We were talking earlier, his voice is so musical. So he's got the words going up and down. If you think about, the Iliad and the Odyssey, epic poetry wasn't even written down. The people who performed it had memorized it. So they were like, they're talking about Troy, and they've got the ocean in their voice kind of, you know. So when you got Sun Ra, he's actually telling you about his whole cosmos and theory of music, the way he enunciates in his choice of language. It just is hypnotic. Sun Ra said he didn't need NASA to travel through space. I mean, there is some things he wrote where I believe it just because Sun Ra said it, but he said he could, if he wanted to, rearrange his molecules so he could actually go to space and come back. Because I've got these little theories about positive and negative and music, because we're made up of atoms and molecules, and you get a little Zen in there too. So that means we're very impermanent. Like, we're looking at each other and we can't see the space between the molecules, but it's there. And they're positive and negative and neutral forces holding atoms together. We learned that like in grammar school and junior high. So we got positive, negative energy in our body. We got open space. And then music, especially analog music or live music, is a wave. So when we hear music, that wave is traveling through our body. Part of it's bouncing off, but some of it's going through the space because it's energy. A wave, like a sound or light wave, is a form of energy. So great music is making our atoms vibrate.
Right. It moves you.
It moves you. And that's where Sun Ra's at. I mean, Sun Ra can really vibrate your molecules. We really value joy, and even extreme joy like ecstasy. Music is one of the mediums, sometimes spoken word, sometimes just like beauty, like color, like light, going back to rays. Rays of light late in the afternoon are so beautiful. Like Jack Kerouac wrote a short book called Scripture of the Golden Eternity, just about feeling really good about watching the autumn sun come in at that special slant. And then when you're at a musical concert, it can sometimes feel like you've turned everything else in the world off and you are really experiencing joy or ecstasy. And it can also even be communal because you look around, a lot of other people are too. So I don't know exactly what that means, but I think I always laugh and say maybe primitive cultures weren't as primitive as we thought.
Oh, for sure.
And so like you have, in New Orleans, they reference, and I think it's referenced the spirit world. In Haitian religion, you go in and out of the real world, through possession. You actually leave this planet for a little while, but you're still physically tied to it. So I think like a trance. So really great music. It doesn't necessarily knock you out, but it can kind of fine tune your whole being and you do get into a trance. I've noticed when I used to go to a lot of black gospel shows, they had a special sanctified beat. It's like kind of syncopated, but it's got push and pull in it. If the ecstasy of the whole, say, Boutwell Auditorium, certain people would reach a state of ecstasy and they would go over backwards in a trance. One of my simple theories is that the entrance to the spirit world is backwards. People always went out backwards. And once in New Orleans, they actually had practitioners of Vodum or Haitian religion in a tent. They had special drums that were different sizes with players who played special beats on them. And the dancers would have ceremony. And when a dancer went out and was possessed, they went over backwards. So I said, duh.
Yeah. I can see it being because that's what you don't see. Like none of our sense organs are on our back. We're totally front oriented. There's a great They Might Be Giants song called Where Your Eyes Don't Go. And it talks about this thing that
right.
that constantly tracks you behind. And no matter how you can spin, you're not going to see the thing that's tracking you through your life, the dark, the skeleton behind you. But I love it. It's so good. But I wonder, like those things are definitely connected. I think there's something to that where you have to relinquish yourself to the unknown in order to go somewhere else, which is not, since we're so directional, that's not like cars don't work that way. Nothing works that way.
Well, it makes me think of the Sufis because I don't know a lot about Sufi dancing, but I know it involves twirling. And I was reading that as you listen to the music and you get involved in the Sufi dance, they call it the 7 colors. You hallucinate 7 different colors as you kind of go up the scale to getting away from this world for a moment, which is coming back down to the simple thing. I mean, you can get away from the world. I've never seen the 7 colors, but my closest I can get is like certain times when I hear that I call the music locks in and you hear all the instruments at once and you realize how great people are playing. And it takes you to that next level where you are kind of in a trance or you have to dance and you might dance 30 or 40 minutes without even realizing that you've done that. So I think it's like a lot of the things that we all share and experience, the modern world, it's hard for people to have time to just stop and say, well, what am I going to do for joy this weekend?
Right.
And I think some primitive cultures, they had time for that. I remember in the early days of improvisational music, going to visit Davy and LaDonna, they wanted everyone there to participate in the improvisational experience. There was no audience. And I got the feeling that the room was an instrument because you probably felt that way too.
It becomes a unit. Yeah.
The unit, everybody's doing something and you feel you actually can experience in great improvisational music, the ideas traveling through all the players. And I'm not saying that you're more involved if you are playing because the audience can get pulled in too. But it was fascinating to me to be within a non-venue environment like somebody's living room. And all of a sudden, the wooden steps, something from the kitchen, whatever anybody's making sound on and communicating with, the whole room turns into the instrument.
Suddenly it's a zone.
Yeah. The lady who wrote this book called The Interior Castle, St. Teresa, I think she's from Spain because there's more than one St. Teresa. She had this really simple way to put it as those Christian mystics trying to get closer to God and experience a kind of a oneness with God. And she's talking about the body being like your interior castle and you open more doors and go into other rooms, and as you go through each room, you're getting closer to God. And then she says, when you think you really got it together, you're really close to God, it's like Monopoly. Bing, you're out of the castle again. People who get attached to doing certain actions, that's really, it's their thing to work out. So what we want is like, one of my other little jokes is, if you like the Grateful Dead and you're going down the highway with a really great CD on, you probably won't have road rage. So we need that kind of artistic, truthful panacea to kind of get back in our culture, or we need to get, utopias always go down the tubes, but I think there's some kind of balance that everyone has to respect, because it's infinite and finite at the same time. Not to be sounding profound, but there's finite resources, but how we use them is infinite.
Yeah, we don't know the ceiling of human potential yet, and wouldn't it be great if we could find that out? Because any improvement on the current model would be welcome.
I keep thinking about, once I heard Nikki Giovanni speak, it really struck home to me, the big ship is sunk. How, you're in the lifeboat and the lifeboat's taking on water. So somebody has to be thrown out of the boat. And, then you have is it the little old lady? Is it the baby? And she said, I want to tell y'all right now, my answer is you don't throw anybody out of the boat. And that's sort of that's what I again call naive politics. I think sometimes that kind of thinking, people miss a very simple point that, you don't throw anybody out of the boat, and it's okay to achieve anything you want. Nobody's trying to hold you back.
Right.
So it's just sort of funny.
And I think you've got a point. Like, we have to have some kind of, whether it's religious or not, we have to have some kind of bowl to hold our soul jelly in, so to
Right.
speak.
The paradigm, if you get stuck on your own paradigm, it's again, like we were saying earlier, it's like saying I don't like rap or I don't like opera. How do you know? And you got your right and your left. All they have to do is overlap a little and everybody will be better. Like, you don't. It's like we're Southerners in football. You can actually have a existence where you like Alabama and Auburn. The kids on both teams really want to win. The fans in the stands, both teams really want to win. But you got to have that. You're really in the spirit of the game when, like in the Civil War, I've seen it in movies and I've read about it, where the Northern or Southern troops would stand up on the lines and cheer an act of heroism, a hero from the other side.
Right.
And then go back to shooting each other. So I don't know exactly what that means. We don't have that in American politics. We don't. We have people who probably may still think that way, but they're afraid to step up and say, hey, I don't really agree with everything this guy says, but what do they say on the street? He's a stand-up guy. It's funny because Sonny, if I can quote it right, Sonny Boy Williamson has this song called Little Village. Too small to be a city, but it's too big to be a town.
Yeah.
I think of Birmingham as a little village because of the way the dynamics of the different communities, little areas of people. And the beauty of the little village is that people of like sensibilities seem to find one another. And I'm sure that happens in New York and San Francisco too. But we talk about the scene here. I think as long as I can remember, people who do things in the creative world really respect and care for each other. And I hope, as they say in the church, there's not as much backbiting and syndicating among the artists. I feel like, that's super important. And I can't remember the exact words, but Davy Williams in an interview once said something real profound. He said, in any street in America or any street in Birmingham, you might be walking down the street looking at houses and you don't know who in which house, what person might be expanding the boundaries of creativity just on their own because they want to do it.
Right.
And Birmingham is a real nurturing place for people who want to personally expand their creative boundaries. And I've always noticed that. And I think maybe it's not just a Southern thing either, but I think Southern people with the gumbo we were talking about, there's something about the live and let live thing. Although, it transcends social structures and politics and everything else. And it's generosity of spirit too, And like if you go to one of the small DIY shows, you feel a real sense of community, like we were talking about, among the players in the audience. So that kind of thing can kind of get you through. And people will come to your art opening. Maybe not a lot of people, but people will, show up. When you are an artist, you want that validation sometime, even in a small way. So I've kind of been attracted to creative and artistic people all my life. Baseball cards I like. That's what I like about Birmingham, among other things. But also I think I went to Boston for about 9 months, but the best job I got was in an all-night fried chicken place. And I wasn't able to make friends. I don't know if it was because of shyness or cultural differences. And I felt kind of like a cultural headhunter. I would like go to as many movies, hear as many shows as I could, but I didn't really make friends like I'd done coming from Fayette just to Birmingham. But then I've heard of people who don't know anybody in New York and go to New York and they fall right into a community of, but people everywhere are kind, I think. But Birmingham's a cool place to maybe have art without the capital A.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've been looking for, is that explanation.
And in African culture, a friend pointed this out to me. I know about a lot of books that I haven't read, but there's a great book on African art called Flash of the Spirit. And I think that guy pointed out in Africa, they don't have a word for artist. It just means someone who makes things. So I kind of think that's a super cool thing. And you take that one step further, people who do art are not necessarily wanting to be rich and famous. They are compelled. They're getting these messages from their subconscious, and they go into their subconscious and they get to be creative. And to me, that's the main gift of art. It's not about necessarily the career. It's not the outcome. The payoff is like you're into your subconscious and you're getting these cool messages from your mind, or the things filtered from the outside through the inside. So, but you want validation too. So
some people get eaten by the expectation that they should be good.
Oh, yeah. There's a whole industry of, quote, criticism that I always thought it's kind of crazy to tell somebody like Prince or Bob Dylan, that's not as good as your last record. Because you say, huh?
Yeah.
No, this isn't my last record. This is my new record. So, but I'm not really putting criticism's cool too, because that's how we find out about stuff. So as one of my friends told me once, said, Jimmy, just go ahead and say something negative about something, okay? Just try it out, because I kind of lean toward let's see the Pollyanna. Let's see the good side of this,
Yeah. I think there's a side of criticism, though, that you're worth me chewing you up a bit to see what's really in there.
Right.
Grab something like a dog and a little bit, because they trust that the thing's not going to fall apart in their mouths. It's going to...
Right. Well, look, if you're in a band, I mean, I might be the person in the band that wouldn't tell somebody you're out of tune or this isn't working. But there's a way of being, I know now after years of experience, there's a way to be direct without being hurtful. You can be you can be direct and be generous and say, of course I'm terrible at setting boundaries, but a band's a good place to learn how to set creative boundaries, because it's like a democratic process and people bring different skills in. Sometimes like it just falls together naturally, or sometimes you hear stories about the guys couldn't even go to the gig in the same car anymore. When I was in junior high, I could look in the mirror and say, am I really there? I was saying that to somebody at a wedding party in Mississippi, and they said, well, I can get you committed tomorrow. I said, oops. To me, there's always a mystery to everything. It's just, life is very, very mysterious. Well, the great guitarist, songwriter Eddie Hinton said, I think life can be extremely dangerous, but it's also even more so. It's mysterious how, that's where luck plays a part in things too.
Yeah, but what's the difference between luck and fate?
Well, that's one of my favorite quotes from Sun Ra. He says, if you want to change your destiny, you've got to find fate in a pleasant mood. And he sings it, and he's like he's explaining it to you like you're in grammar school. When you hear his voice saying that, it's very reassuring to me. It's kind of sanding away at feeling guilty or having regret. And like he's saying, all right, he's talking to the orchestra, we're going to have some discipline here, so that when we get to Europe, there are going to be a lot of people who know a lot about music there listening, like the whole. So we're not going to embarrass ourselves. We're going to have another rehearsal.
Right. Cool. Well, Jimmy, thank you.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
And if you people are down in Birmingham in 5 Points, hit up Renaissance Records. You want to say a thing about Renaissance before we get off?
Oh, just that it's a real fun place and there are records everywhere. Birmingham's a great city from record stores.
Yeah.
Shop all the record stores and flea markets you can find. Don't miss a chance to free the music that's contained. When you go in a record store, there are all these grooves, and when you put the needle in the groove, you uncover sound. Some of it may have been locked there for decades.